សួស្តីអ្នកទាំងអស់គ្នា Welcome to Khmer Voices, where we shine a spotlight on the achievements of the Khmer diaspora around the world. I'm your host, Wani, aka Vanny. Happy New Year! I'm so excited to be back and kick off 2025 with Keo Sar. He's a fascinating man with a warm soul. For a few years, starting at 8 or 9 years old, Keo, his brother, and their father used to rise at 5 a.m. to collect cans for about an hour and a half to make ends meet in between his dad's disability checks. So he'd wake up at 5, collect cans, then clean up, eat breakfast, and go to school. And you know what they called him at school? The Cambodian Can Collector. But this didn't bother him. It was a way for them to get by. That's how he saw it. Now, this experience was buried in Keo's memory, but it played a role in shaping who he is today. Who is he? Well, he's a Khmer-American entrepreneur, advisor, speaker, and angel investor with over 10 years of experience scaling U.S.-based startups in the San Francisco Bay Area. He's a 2-time chief revenue officer, and he's led teams in business development, sales, customer success, and operations. And since 2020, he's been living somewhere pretty cool in Belgrade, Serbia, with his dog Bibi, and he spends his spare time exploring the world, writing and hiking. Currently, Keo is the COO and partner at Matter Product Studio, a US-based firm focused on AI-driven digital transformation that collaborates with mid-market and enterprise clients to enhance their technology capabilities. He has a deep belief that talent is equally distributed, but access and opportunities are not. So this drives his passion to be involved in emerging markets, supporting underserved and underrepresented founders, providing mentorship in accelerators and incubators globally, and most recently in Cambodia. He serves as a board member of the Federation of Cambodian Startups and is an entrepreneur in residence for Teco Startup Center, and his 2 startups finished top 2 in the recent batch. Now, if you'd like to learn more about the Federation and the Startup Center, I have included the links in the show notes. Now, Keo has something to share with the Khmer diaspora as well regarding working in Cambodia, so be sure to listen all the way through. Get to know Keo and learn how he got to where he is today doing such meaningful work. So, Keo, welcome to Khmer Voices. I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Vani. I am super excited to be on the show and talk through our experiences and see where we land, and hopefully share something inspiring.
Let's hear what your journey was like, starting from the very beginning, when you arrived in the U.S., where you were born and where you grew up, and how you got into what you're doing now, and how you're in Serbia. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's been a heck of a journey, but like many 1.5 generation 1.5, I was born in a refugee camp in Thailand because our parents escaped Cambodia during the war, and then we got transferred to the Philippines. So we got sponsored by some really close family friends that were in San Diego. They had escaped and settled into San Diego before us, so they were the family that sponsored us, and that's how I ended up we ended up in San Diego, where I grew up.
How old were you at that time when you immigrated to?
I was 3 years old.
Sorry?
I was 3 years old.
3, okay.
Yeah, so pretty young. I have very little recollection of, if none, of Thailand, a little bit of the Philippines, mostly, the lush green hills, and being hospitalized because I had bad asthma as a kid and almost died. So that
must have been scary for your parents.
I assume so. Being hospitalized and I think at that age, not understanding your parents' emotions, I assume it was scary. I just remember being in this bubble in the hospital, and the only time I got to leave it was to eat and to go to the bathroom. And one of my parents were there all the time, and I don't remember when I left the hospital, but yeah, that was the memory I have of it.
I don't remember anything, and I came to Canada around the same age as you. That's amazing that your memory goes back that far. Maybe because it was such an
It's a blessing
experience.
and a curse.
Yeah. So you remember
Blessing and a
time in
curse.
the refugee camp?
No, I don't remember that part
Okay.
at all. Interesting. In 2019 for my birthday, I rounded up some of my close friends. I recruited them. Say, hey, we're gonna go find this refugee camp in Thailand somewhere, and they're like, that's what best friends do. They're like, we're in, and we went and found the refugee camp, and I just remember when I first contacted them, they said, "There's a hut. There's some keys. Show yourself in. Take your self tour, and then lock it up." I was fine with that. A month before the trip, wrote them again, and they said, "Well, we actually have a caretaker. He can show you around." I'm like, "That's even better." But he wasn't just a caretaker. He actually worked at the refugee camp, and he spoke French, Laos, Thai, Khmer, English, and he showed us around. And I asked him very specifically. I was like, "Hey, I was born in Commune 6. Can you take me there?" And he walked us through Commune 6. And my friends told me I just walked completely through the jungle. They didn't follow me because they were being bitten by mosquitoes. I didn't even feel anything. And we got to Commune 6. I'm like, this is where my life began. So I guess it was a bit of a out of body experience, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
being there.
Amazing. How long
And
were you there for? How long did you visit?
we were there for the day.
Okay. So you were
In Thailand, in total, we were there for 2 weeks.
okay. So it was a sort of like a day trip to sort of rediscover
It was
where
a
you
day
came
trip,
from.
and even just finding a ride to the refugee camp
Mm-hmm.
and then actually finding the refugee camp was also in itself an adventure.
Was it in the middle of nowhere? Like, what does it look like now?
It's been taken back by the jungle.
Okay.
There's some signage, so we had to call and talk to several people, and we finally met the caretaker because he directed us. He didn't say it was like some street. It was he basically gave us, well, there's this building. You'll see, this turn, and you'll see a little hut, and it's there somewhere, and just wait for me there. And then he showed us the rest of the way. And from what he told me, they're trying to turn it into some sort of preservation center. So hopefully, I don't know how much progress has been made on it, but when I was there, they had at least built a small building where they showed the replica of the refugee camp at scale, and a lot of the artifacts from the refugee camp are there.
Okay. So it's sort of like an education center sort of thing that they're trying to do.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, education preservation center.
Okay. Very cool. So we kind of digressed a bit. So let's go back to you were sponsored by a family in the US and then you landed in San Diego, is it?
Yeah, San Diego, California.
Mm-hmm. What was it like growing up
Yeah,
in
so
San
that's
Diego?
um, I still think it's the best city in the world all year round on average weather wise, and it was outside of the weather. It was nice because I had a decent sized Cambodian community, and my dad was the president of the Cambodian Buddhist Society. So he spent a lot of time at the temple on a volunteer basis, just helping to expand the temple. Built a school for Khmer kids and adults to learn the language because the culture and the language aspect of it for him was very important. He wanted to be able to preserve that for the diaspora and the refugees, and so a lot of the things that happen as far as community events go, they happen at that temple, and it's still there to this day. I don't know if they're still running the school, but it my siblings and I spent quite a bit of time there on the weekends, and at first you don't really appreciate it because you're like, wait, I'm going to American school, quote unquote, Monday through Friday, and then you're waking me up at 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday to go to Khmer school.
Uh-huh.
when the rest of the kids are either sleeping in or watching cartoons on Saturday and Sunday morning. I was like, how's that fair? But as you get older and you come to appreciate these kind of things in retrospect, I'm very grateful for that. Our family, we spent a lot of time together at the beach, and uh, we were poor like many other refugee families, but we had what we needed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of your other guests said, yeah, we didn't have a lot of money, but our stomachs were always full.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I could say the same for our family. Like we weren't very rich. I mean, at some point there was 8 of us in a 1-bedroom apartment,
Oh, wow.
but we always had great food because of my mom.
Yeah.
She was a magician in the kitchen, and still to this day, very, very proud of her cooking.
Mm-hmm. How many siblings do you have?
And there's 6 of us.
Wow.
And it's
are you the eldest?
No, second oldest.
Okay.
Second oldest.
Did you have to take care of your?
3 of us were born. Mm-hmm. In a way, no, because my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and we kind of patched things together. So one of the kind of critical things that happened for our family was my dad was a janitor. At least that's what I think he was. He was working for a company, and I think it was like a medicine processing plant in San Diego. Got hurt on a job, and then ended up on disability when I was very young. So you can imagine the impact that like has on our family, because we don't have that income coming in. My mom didn't really speak English that well, and she had kids to raise. So we kind of patched things together. I recently wrote a story about for several years my dad waking my older brother and I up at 5 a.m. in the morning to go collect cans and bottles for recycling, because that's how we bridged the income gap.
Wow.
And this went on for several years, and it was I didn't think about that story until I was in Cambodia recently at my cousin's wedding in the countryside. And I don't know if you've been to a wedding in the Cambodian countryside. They drink beer or cans, whatever, you just throw it on the ground because someone is going to come pick it up. And there was this gang of kids walking around barefoot with their sack and just putting cans and bottles in there. And it just reminded me of this period of my life that I don't know if I forgot or just suppressed. But yeah, we did my mom was a hustler. She grew things and fished and sold all of that to try to make ends meet and make sure that, like I said again, our stomachs were full.
You went to university and studied English, and then I'm going to talk about your education and your career later on. Well, you'll talk about it. But what was school like for you?
High school was easy.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel challenged because my dad, well, both my parents had this philosophy or thesis around education as the most important equalizer. So very much pushed us to get education. So I got really good grades in school, but my dad took it a step further, meaning like education for him wasn't just about what you learned in school. So oftentimes he would drop us off at the library and just kind of let us explore. So I would read a ton of books there and kind of learn architecture and just things that I was really curious about. We were involved in various activities as well. So I did a lot of like traditional Cambodian dancing when I was young too, and that was
Very
also
cool.
like a learning experience for me, and also tied me to the Khmer culture as a kid growing up in the U.S. So yeah, I think I read quite a bit when I was young, and my dad encouraged it, and that's where I picked up a lot of knowledge. And when I got to university, initially I wanted to be an engineer. and it was purely driven by engineers make a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
That was my running thesis. But I was also always been a bit of a rebel. So when my first year of university, I was like, this is boring. Like I just, I just couldn't picture myself doing that for the rest of my life. And at that time, I thought it was like, oh, if you start on this track, you always be on this track.
Mm.
So I took a gap year and was working and did some travels, and then when I came back, I decided to switch my major to English, specifically in creative writing, because I've always been a creative person, and actually wrote my first book in second grade. It was about penguins.
Can we get a
And
copy?
yeah, if I can find it. And I wrote this book, and I can't draw to save my life, but my classmate at the time, who's also Khmer, she was an amazing artist. So I remember going up to her, so proud. I was like, hey, I have an offer for you. And she's like, what? I was like, I wrote this book. She's like, you did what? I'm like, I wrote a book, but I need you to illustrate it. And she thought about it for a minute, and she's like, well, can I at least take it home and read it? I'm like, yeah, go ahead, take it home and read it. And then she came back the next day, and she's like, okay, I'll illustrate your book. I'm like, cool.
What was the story about? You said about a penguin. What was the lesson? Was there like
It was, I don't know if there was a lesson. It was just about, so I'll tell you what inspired it. It was, I don't know if you've heard the book, Mr. Popper's Penguins. It's a children's book about penguins. And so I read that, and I'm like, oh, penguins are so cool. Let me try to write a book about penguins too. And I think I called it like Penguin City or something like that.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I remember you saying that you wanted to actually write a book about, was it your dad, in another podcast? So he sounds like he was a big inspiration in your life. Can you tell us how he inspired you?
Yeah. Well, my dad was my best friend, and he passed away almost 10 years ago now. And I think what I most appreciated about my father was the fact that he provided guidelines to live life, but he never told me I had to be a certain profession or go into anything specific. He very much encouraged my curiosities, and it was I remember the weekend after we cremated him, I had to take a break for myself just because it was like super intense. Like I went to Cambodia right before he died, and then there's like the funeral and everything that happened. And I took a weekend away. I was living in San Francisco at the time. I took a weekend away to go up to Napa and just disconnect. And I was walking by this little kind of it was just a shop full of knickknacks, and there was this sign in the window, and it just made me freeze. And I just remember like stopping there with my girlfriend at the time, and I just started crying. And she asked me what's wrong. I'm like, well, look at the sign, and it said, I think something along the lines of my father didn't tell me how to live. He lived and let me watch him do it. And that kind of summed up like my dad's life. And I very much appreciated him just allowing me to be me and figuring things out, with call it bumper lanes, if you will. And because I think the beauty, part of the beauty of life is just that, just figuring it out. And because I've heard other Asian parents are like, oh, you got to be a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. He never necessarily said anything. He's like, look, get educated, figure out how to solve problems really well. You'll figure out what you'll be in life.
Oh, are your siblings sort of like at your level too?
In what sense?
Professionally, like have they achieved everything that they wanted, that they set out for?
Yes and no. One of my brothers, he's really senior at Sony Animation Studios. super proud of him. He's actually getting married in March.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think my other siblings are still finding their way in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they took as well to my dad's side of discipline as I did. Because I asked him one time, I was like, why are you always toughest on me? Because he was, and my siblings recognized that. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, because you can take it.
Mm-hmm.
And, at the time when I was younger, I'm like, that's not fair.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, how's that equal? Uh, but, I think you learn to have an appreciation for these things, given some space and distance and experience. And now, I'm glad he was tougher on me than my siblings were.
Let's go back to your childhood. So you mentioned the financial
Mhm.
restraints that you had growing up.
Mhm.
Were there any other challenges that you encountered where you just wish that life was just a bit easier?
Yeah, if I were to try to pinpoint something, I think it was trying to figure out who I was in the context of being Khmer at home,
Mm,
where my parents only spoke to us in Khmer and very much wanted us to be Khmer in the home. But then stepping outside the home, you're growing up in America and you're American also. And sometimes those two didn't necessarily coalesce in the way that you think they should. And oftentimes there's almost this like identity crisis, if you will, where it's like where to actually fit in.
mm-hmm,
So I struggled with that for a long time, because I had, like, in the neighborhood that I grew up in, most of my friends, and like, I want to say most, a lot of my friends ended up in like gangs,
mm,
because that was the thing in Southeast San Diego. But I also grew up with a group of friends that were also very like multicultural. So it was always this balancing act of, I go to a Cambodian neighborhood and was seen as an outsider because I wasn't involved in gangs and
mm,
wasn't with the crew. But then like I hang out with my American friends, and it was almost the same thing, but almost the opposite. It's like, well, you're not American.
mm,
So it was tricky, and it took me a very long time to get comfortable with just who I am, which is like both.
mm-hmm,
um, and being accepting of both, and being able to honor uh, being both an American and Khmer. So now when people like ask me, I just tell them I'm Khmer American.
mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Did you have any role models aside from your dad professionally? So, outside of your personal life, was there anyone that you looked up to that you aspired to be like?
Yes, definitely. His name's Andy. And he's still a mentor, and I very much look up to him as an older brother. When we first met, I was still in university, and he was working at Boeing. He had a 25-year career at Boeing doing various things, and I thought he had the coolest job, because every time we saw each other, because we met each other playing softball, slow pitch softball,
Mm-hmm.
and he was from Seattle, and because I had cousins in Seattle, so we bonded almost immediately. And he would tell me, his job allowed him to travel quite a bit. And he would tell me all these stories. I'm like, man, you have the coolest job ever. I want your job. And he's like, well, careful what you wish for. He's like, I'm on the road through like 300 days a year.
Mm,
And he's like, it's not as sexy as you think it is. But I think what I appreciate about him most is every conversation we have. It's very thought provoking, because he'll ask questions that kind of stop me in my tracks and force me to kind of rethink what I'm thinking or think about something new. So that's one piece of it. Even when I didn't believe in myself,
mm-hmm,
he expressed a deep belief in me.
mm,
So much so that he actually convinced me to quit one of my jobs, because he said, I see so much more in you. I don't know why you're doing this right now. And it took me several months, but I left that job, and it's yeah, the rest is kind of history in terms of like my trajectory. But yeah, we still meet on a monthly basis
Uh-huh.
just to do a catch up call. And he's been a really big influence in my life.
Amazing. Let's go back to your schooling. So you went
Mm,
through high school. It wasn't challenging. You studied engineering initially, and then you ended up graduating. Well, you decided to switch over to English, and then you worked
yes,
for a few years.
I worked for a few years and then I went back to grad school. And then this was at the urging of my father,
Uh huh.
actually. And because I didn't think I needed to get a master's degree.
Uh huh.
But my dad, going back to what I said earlier about him being very ardent about getting educated and continuing to grow yourself, he said, I would love to see before, and this was like my dad's way of kind of getting his way without saying it directly. He's like, I would love to see you finish grad school before I die. I'm like, okay, Dad. So, I'm like, no, I learned a few tricks from you. So I was like, okay, if I go to grad school and I finish grad school, we're taking a trip together to Cambodia to celebrate.
Aw.
Because during the time that we lived in the US, like he'd never gone back. And
Wow.
like my mom has gone back several times. We're actually planning another trip here in January. This would be almost 10 years since our last trip. I've been back twice this year, but every time I brought up taking a trip with my dad, he always would come up with some sort of excuse
Uh huh.
as to why he couldn't or didn't want to go. And for me, I think it came down to him wanting to prove to people back home that he had built this successful life in America,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't think like he achieved that because he got hurt in a job and
Mm.
he'd been on disability for as long as I could remember. So in a way, I almost felt like there was some shame from him of not being this successful person.
Did you
And
ask him that?
I didn't. This is just things that I sussed out, post him passing away.
Could it be like a trauma
Uh,
response too, though? Because I think I heard you sharing the fact that he was almost executed, and then
yes,
he was saved by the fact
yes,
that the Vietnamese took over.
yes. It's possible. It's just one of those conversations I'll never
You'll never know
really
the answer
know
to.
because
Yeah.
it's not something we talked about. Because like I'd bring it up, and a few times he'd say, "Oh well, when you have $10,000, then we'll go."
Right.
And then when I finally said that, I was like, "Well, I have $10,000." He's like, "Well, let's do it another time." So
So
it, it was
you were working, and then you went back to school and you finished. Okay,
mm,
let's
mm,
step back some more, because what were you doing between undergrad and
yeah,
getting your master's? What kind of work were you doing then?
mhm. Yeah. So my career started at two Fortune 100 companies. One was one of the largest, or if not the largest, electronics retailer in the world. Best Buy. They're still around.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second. So before I started grad school, I started working at Wells Fargo, which is again one of the largest financial institutions in the world. And between those two organizations, I just found out I'm just not a corporate person,
So then you
which
went
is
back to
where
school.
I went back to school because one, my my dad, we made that agreement.
Uh-huh.
Two, uh, I've always enjoyed math and finance, and thought it was a good idea to just go ahead and get the degree and also to build that network through grad school. Because I think oftentimes I don't know what's next,
Mm.
like in terms of like the longer term picture. It's usually just the next few steps that I can see clearly, and I just go do that. And it's worked out so far. But yeah, so that's when I started grad school, and then a few months after that, I quit my job at the bank and was doing school full time, which was new to me because when I was doing my undergrad, I was also working full time. So I
Whoa.
didn't have what your typical, um, I guess, university experience because of that. I was taking night classes and trying to squeeze in classes in between. And fortunately, the job, although it was full time, was flexible because it's retail.
Hmm.
But yeah, I wanted to be a full time student for like at least a year, and I did that. I'm like, oh, this is kind of nice. And then yeah, and then I started my tech career in the middle of all of it. So
Uh-huh. And so you started in tech because you realized you weren't a corporate person.
correct, yeah, and and there's nothing wrong with people who want careers in
Mm-hmm.
corporations. It's stable for the most part. You get paid really well. There's
Mm-hmm.
all these benefits, but for myself, it's not dynamic enough. I need to be able to create, to think differently, to think outside the box, and put things in action, and to be able to push innovation. Because the way I view technology, it's that you're creating a new paradigm that ideally has an impact on the way people access existing services. For example, it could be health, it could be financial services. That's where most of my career is at. It could be something else. Technology should be used to make life easier for people.
So,
Yeah.
like, how did you get started in that? Because it's not something that, there's no like path that you take. Like, for example, an engineer, you go to school for that.
Yeah.
Doctor, you go to school for that. Lawyer, you go to school for that. But like, how did you know what prompted you to go that route?
Mm, it's a bit of serendipity. I had he's really one of my good friends, and we were so close that we called each other cousins. And if you listen to my other podcast, you probably also picked up that he took his own life a few years ago, and that was also really really challenging for me. But he was working at the tech company, and for months had been trying to recruit me. And between grad school and I was also working for myself, I was like, no, this is fine. And then I started to just research the company. I'm like, oh, this is really interesting because they were democratizing lending. It's a company called Lending Club, and they were allowing people to make small investments, retail investors, into notes, which are typically reserved for institutional investors.
Mm.
So I, as a retail investor, I can invest as a little as $100 and be able to get returns based on my risk profile through this platform, which was at that time very novel. And we ended up being the largest fintech in the world at one point. We IPO'd 18, I think it was 18 months after I joined, and we had an $8 billion Wall Street debut. So I applied, and initially when I applied, it was for I, I think it was a processing position, but I had several conversations with the recruiter, and she said, "Well, like we're also hiring for a manager. Would you like to interview for that? Because I think you'd be a better fit there." And so I interviewed for manager position instead, got the job, and at some point at the company, I was managing. I think it was close to 150 people with 10 to 15 direct reports and working on a bunch of different projects. So just kind of I consumed it and was just so happy with like the dynamic around the company and being able to just go in and walk into the CEO's office and say, hey, like I have this idea on how to make the company much more efficient. It's like, okay, let's hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas that would have never happened in, if I had stayed in the corporate world.
Yeah.
So that's how my tech career started. And then and Lending Club was already later stage at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So as much as I was able to get involved in the building of it, I had this itch I needed to scratch, which is to almost build something from the ground up. So I went, much earlier stage to a company that had just raised a Series A. So they hired me to head their sales and operations. That company eventually got acquired. I went to another fintech in New York, also post Series A. I built their customer success team from almost the ground up. I think we were 3 when I started, 25 when by the time I left, and now they're a unicorn. And for those who aren't familiar with what that is, it's a company with $1 billion valuation, which is a pretty huge milestone for a startup.
No lies,
And
I actually had to
companies
look
doing
that up because you mentioned it a couple of times. I was like, what the heck is that? So, thank you for clarifying that.
yeah. They said know your audience.
Mm.
So yeah, no, so that company's doing extremely well, and will likely go public next year, I
Mm-hmm.
hope. And then the last companies, because I think this will answer your question of how I ended up in Serbia. So the last tech company that I wasn't a co-founder of, they recruited me to be part of their exec team. But the caveat there was I had to move to Belgrade, Serbia, and to be honest, I had no idea where that was. And they're like, look, I think they sensed my hesitancy because the compensation and everything was really good, and but I'm like, am I really going to move to a country I've never been before? So they said, look, we'll fly you out, spend a week here, meet the team, get to understand the culture a bit, explore the city. If it's not for you, no harm, no foul. I was like, okay, I can take a free trip to Europe. Yeah, so I moved. I eventually took the job and moved here 3 weeks before COVID, which
Oh,
was a
man.
whole different story. But yeah, that was almost 5 years ago now, and I think year one it was I didn't get to really experience the full life because of COVID. Year two was like my first full year, and then I left the company and started working for myself for a bit, but just didn't want to go back to the U.S.
So is that home for the time
So
being? For the
it's
foreseeable
home for the
future?
time being, but I'm actually on no, I'm actually on the move. I think
Oh,
I've exhausted my time here, and in the process of relocating myself to Spain to be by the beach
very
again in warm weather.
nice. What's the food scene like in Belgrade?
Oh my God, the food here is actually quite amazing.
Uh-huh.
So the traditional Serbian dish is meat, like meat everywhere.
Uh-huh.
So it's very heavy, but if you're a meat lover, it's like a haven for you. And they typically serve it with endless amounts of bread. This kind of, I guess it's kind of like almost a homemade cheese called kaimak and ivar, which is like this tomato paprika paste, and
Mm.
it's all very good. But
Mm-hmm.
again, just all very heavy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so then there's food like sarma, but it's since I've been here, the food scene has become much more international.
Mm.
So you can pretty much find food from all over the world now at this
Oh,
point. And
nice.
yeah, it's
And where in Spain are
if you
you moving
if
to?
you love
Mm?
Valencia,
Oh, nice. I've been there.
yeah,
Beautiful city. Beautiful.
it is a beautiful city. Yeah,
And it's not too
and it
big, but you've got that city feel to it. Yeah.
exactly. So and the reason I picked it was because I went there for the first time last year, and I'm
Mm.
like, oh, this is kind of like San Diego.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, that's, yeah. Yeah.
so that was the vibe, and because if I ever move back to the U.S., it
Hmm.
would be back to San Diego, and Valencia felt that way.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. So what are you
yeah,
doing now? Can you tell us what you're up to?
yeah. I'll break it down into kind of three areas that I'm working on. So my day job, as I like to call it, is I'm the COO of a company in the U.S.
Hmm.
We do AI centric digital transformation mainly for mid-market and enterprise clients. So we do it under the the pillars of consulting, education, and build. So we'll come in and help clients figure out how to leverage technology to optimize their business and then to grow and scale it from there. So that's what takes up most of my time. I'm also an angel investor, so I belong to several different angel investing organizations, mainly in emerging markets, because I think my dollar is just more. impactful than if I were to be an angel investor in the US, which has a thriving capital markets, and founders there have access to resources that founders in emerging markets don't. And that's kind of where I focus my attention.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third thing that takes up a lot of my time is I work with different emerging market ecosystems to work, effectively capacity building. So I brought up the recent trip to Cambodia in July, where I'll go into a country for a week or two, spend time in the local ecosystem, meet founders, meet other investors, meet startup support organizations to try to get a better understanding of what's happening, and then we'll oftentimes do workshops covering several days, typically around investment readiness. It could be product and pricing, and then also a bit of forecasting and financial modeling, just depending on what the need is. And yeah, I enjoyed that quite a bit because it allows me to take all this experience that I've gained, all this knowledge and the network, and be able to give that to founders in emerging markets. Because the way I view the world is that I think talent is equally distributed, but access and opportunities aren't.
Oh, I love
So
that.
how do I do my part in equalizing that part of it? And yeah, it's fun. I get to meet really interesting people, and
So
and
what
get to
did you
try a bunch of.
you mentioned before I hit record, you mentioned you wanted to reach the Cambodian diaspora. What did you want to say to us?
Um, I want to say that there are opportunities to give back to the homeland, the home country. There are a lot of things that are changing there. I think there's a changing of the guard in the leadership, and I would say take the time to spend time on the ground there. Don't necessarily believe everything that you hear and see on whether it's the radio, TV, Facebook, TikTok, because there are people on the ground in Cambodia that are trying to make an impact for the better. And I can speak specifically to the innovation ecosystem because there are several organizations that are working on how to enhance uh, Cambodia's tech capabilities so that it does become one of the more prominent centers in the world. And right now, I just joined the board of an organization. I think they can come up with a better name, but I'll let them figure that out. But it's the the Federation of Cambodian Startups, and but the founder very much passionate about catalyzing Cambodian's ecosystem and turning it into like the Silicon Valley of the Mekong Delta. And so it's a big mission, but they're setting up an office now in Diamond Island. From the pictures that I saw, it looks pretty nice, and hopefully I'll get to visit it on my next trip. But the people there, they're young, they're hungry to learn, and if you have an opportunity to get involved, I think it would be hugely beneficial uh, for the people who are trying to make an impact there, and just for the country in general.
So how do they get involved?
Yeah, so there's several organizations, and I'm in contact with all of them right now. So there's like Swiss Contact Cambodia,
Mm-hmm.
there's the Tech Center, there's Khmer Enterprise, which is like the main enterprise that's running a lot of the tech organizations there, and I know, like I said, the heads of all of those. So what we're trying to figure out now is just that, like, what's the easiest way for the Khmer diaspora to get involved? So I guess
Can they reach
I
out to
can
you?
reach. Yeah, they can reach out to me. I was going to say, I'm like, they can reach out to you as well. Once I know more details,
Mm-hmm.
and you can share it with the network, but they can also reach out to myself. And I'm on LinkedIn. I might be the only Keo Sar on there,
I
so
think you are, yeah.
uh, so it shouldn't be too hard to find.
I'll link to
Um,
your profile in the show notes, so it shouldn't be too
yeah,
hard. Yeah.
and then yeah, I think that's the best way to reach me for now. And but yeah, once I have more updates, more concrete updates, happy to share them with you as well, and you
Great.
can share in your network because there are already people who have gone back and are involved in the like the president or the head of Khmer Enterprise is actually Khmer Australian, and he moved back 4 or 5 years ago to take on this role, and there are others like him, so
Oh, awesome.
it's really cool to see.
I want to talk a little bit more about you. Like, what drives you? How did you get through? How did you get through university, working a full-time job? Like, what were you thinking? What were you feeling? Because 40
Hmm.
hours a week minimum, plus being a full-time student, like, how did you do it? What were you telling yourself to get through that?
I told myself I had to because my parents couldn't afford to put me through school
Did you have any
in San
financial aid?
Francisco. I had a little financial aid, but it
Okay.
didn't cover. It covered part of the tuition, but San Francisco is a very expensive place
Mm-hmm.
for those who haven't been. So for someone who doesn't come from a wealthy family, going to a place like San Francisco for the first time, it can be quite shocking. Because I think a few months into it, I remember this so vividly now because I think it was like my room was a tiny room for $500 that I was paying, and I could barely afford that. And I drove like my beat up car, and I got to this point where I'm like, I might have to live in my car for a bit. Um, that's how bad it got. I remember I had $16 to my name, and I was like, I don't have any food, and I need some gas.
Oh
So
man.
I basically split the difference. So I, bought $8 worth of food. It's like frozen chicken, some milk and cereal, and some noodles, and then filled up $8 worth of gas. I was like, okay, this should last me for a week until I hit payday. So I made it to payday, and
Wow.
um,
Did you
yeah,
tell anybody? Did you tell your parents at all? So you just kind of did it by yourself. You went through it
yeah,
your
because
alone?
yeah, I mean, my thought process at the time was like, I made this decision to move
Mm,
to San Francisco
okay.
to, to enroll in school here and to start my adult life here. So I have to figure it out. And, it's something I'm still trying to overcome in a way. And what I mean by that is just asking for help
Mm-hmm.
because I'm so used to just doing things on my own. But I know that's not always the best way to operate. And I've also have to keep reminding myself that there are people who do want to help if you ask for it. Um, so yeah, but no, I mean it was really just out of pure necessity.
Wow.
I just figured it out because between wanting to make my parents proud and also not wanting to be a burden on them, I was just like, I'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
If
Oh,
I
they must have been so proud of you when you got that your first job out of university.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, they don't
It's
really
not
tell us
something
that stuff.
they don't really tell us that, and I don't know if you've experienced this. This is more so my mom than my dad.
Uh-huh.
Is like that, survival mentality,
Mm-hmm.
and where I would tell my mom, "Oh, mom, like I just got this promotion," and like she'd be happy, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but there's always that but where she was like, "Well, okay, good. Don't piss off your boss. Your colleagues might be jealous of you, so
Oh
watch out for
man.
that." And it was this constant thing, and I don't think she really stopped that until probably a few years ago.
Really? Even after
I
all your
think it finally,
success? Oh wow.
yeah.
Were your friends that you hung out with, they were overachievers as well, or were they
Um,
what were
no,
they
I mean,
like?
I think I love my friends.
Mm-hmm.
They're such an amazing group of people, and they're so what's the word? They've achieved so many things in their own lives,
Mm-hmm.
and whenever we get together, I think it's interesting. It's like we don't ever even talk about it, and
What do you
it's
mean?
this sense of
Like you don't talk about
we
work?
don't talk about our success, right? We don't talk about the things that we're doing
Ah,
at work,
right. Yeah.
and the things that we're dealing with, and promotions or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's always the personal things that are happening in our lives, and
Right.
just catching up, which I actually really really appreciate, because I go to a lot of events and conferences, and people start asking me about my work, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
just stop them like, look, I don't want to talk about my job. It's like the least interesting thing about me, and people are like, what?
Why are you here?
um, yeah, yeah. And I was like, ask me something different. Like, you pull the cord, it's just like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, yeah, okay. Ask me something more interesting. But no, I, uh, I've learned so much from my friends, and not necessarily except related to my professional life.
Mm-hmm.
It's they're just really all great people,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the level that we get on. So we typically talk about what's going on in our families, what's going on in the world,
Mm-hmm.
how do we want to impact the world in our own ways, and
You talk
are
about your
there
dreams.
ways,
Yeah.
yeah, to come
Mm-hmm.
together and work on those things. So that's a majority of our conversation.
That's awesome.
And like, we're very open with each other,
Uh-huh.
and vulnerable with each other, which I think is critical.
Who do you look up to
So,
now? Do you have anyone that you look up to?
my mom,
Yeah.
she's 70 now,
Uh-huh.
and still so active. She watches my nieces and my nephew. Still tends to the garden. Um, Still cooks like a mean meal. I mean, she's still so proud. I spoke to her the other day, and she was at the temple recently for Jumben,
Mm-hmm.
and she was like, "Yeah, the monks were telling me how much they love my food." And the cha and the yays were all waiting for me to bring food.
Oh, so cute.
But yeah, it gives her so much pride to feed people.
Uh-huh.
And I remember growing up, my friends would come over just to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, we didn't have a lot of money, but like somehow she always figured out how to feed everyone.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. There's always food on the table for friends. Definitely.
yeah.
It's
And I
sort of
think one of
that
the things I think about too,
village mentality too with the Khmer culture.
100%, it is. And I think one of the things I think about with my mom too is she's such a hustler. And I imagine if she had been given the same opportunities as my siblings and I had, what she would do with it.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, and that keeps me going. That keeps me fighting.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Has she visited you in Serbia?
No, so I moved here during COVID,
Uh-huh.
so there's absolutely no travel for several years,
Uh-huh.
and then during COVID, my sister had my nephew. So she was helping my because my sister's a single mom,
Mm.
so she was helping my sister. And then about a year after that, my brother had his daughter, so she was busy with that. And plus, I don't know if she would like actually Serbia, because it's too cold in the winter, and she can't necessarily walk anywhere. Like my mom's one of those people. Like I took her to Paris, several years ago,
Uh-huh.
and you know, Paris is a very walkable city. That's what you do in Paris. And she was just complaining about how much walking she had to do. And I was like, Mom, that's the point of like being on holiday.
Yeah.
Uh, and so she's funny, but yeah, on that trip to Paris was also just a special trip, because she reunited with my aunt, her cousin that she hadn't seen in over 3 decades.
Oh, wow.
It was like the most amazing. I just still have this image in my head where they saw each other because we had a meeting place. They ran towards each other, gave each other like the biggest hug, and locked arms, and just started skipping down the street. Like
Oh.
my sister and I are just looking at each other like, what's going on right now?
Like she's a little girl all over again.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh. So it sounds like you do a lot of traveling. Is that what you do for fun?
Yeah. I tell people I have a pretty boring life, but no, I travel quite a bit because if I don't remember exactly what I wanted to be as a kid,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but there are like three clear things that I wanted to do. One was be a writer. Two was travel the world, and three was make a positive impact on the world. And I think I'm fortunate enough to be able to say I'm checking those things off the box. But yeah, I travel quite a bit for both personal and work. And then I have a dog. She's almost 10 now. She's a Labrador Pit Bull mix. Her name's BB.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm not traveling, we spend a lot of time hiking or trail running here in Serbia.
Nice.
And I'm a big foodie, so I love food from everywhere, along with uh, drinks from everywhere. So coming up, I'm doing like my fifth annual Friendsgiving here in Belgrade, and I have wine from like 5 or 6 different countries. So looking forward to serving and having that. And yeah, I still do a ton of reading, and I write mainly on Medium as a platform.
Okay.
I like to say I write at the cross section of business and life,
Uh-huh.
because I think there's so much crossover there, and it's hard to separate. Even though I know people talk about work life balance, I don't think it necessarily works that way. That's just my opinion. And yeah, that's really it.
Could you send me the
Try to
link
enjoy it.
to your articles on Medium?
Yeah, of
Okay, that
course.
would be great. And in terms of writing, what else do you do in that capacity? Are you planning to
Mm,
write a book on your dad? I think you mentioned that. Was there anything else that you're planning to write? And
yeah,
when can we expect a book?
I don't know. I had several book offers or offers to write a book, and it would require me to take a break from some of the things I'm working on now, and I don't know when that would be. So I don't have a definitive answer.
Hmm.
What I am definitive on is yes, I would love to write a book because uh, doing things like this podcast with you, it just triggers a lot of things that I've forgotten or things that I hadn't thought about, and also things that I want to share, and it needs to get centralized somewhere. So it's on the docket. I just can't. I don't know when.
You know what? I forgot to ask you.
Yeah.
Oh, it was like one of the first questions I wanted to ask you too. I asked you in the email, what advice would you give to your younger self? And then you said, this is your response, quote, the
Mm.
advice I would give to my younger self is don't seek external validation. You have everything within you to build and become the person you can be proud of and to trust your process, even when you can't see how it will turn out. So who were you talking to? At what age was Gao then?
Oof. Wow. Was that really what I wrote?
Yeah, don't seek external validation. Because it
Yeah.
sounded like even though you didn't know what you wanted to do growing up, you figured it
mm,
out along the way. So what were you trying to get validate? Like, why were you trying to seek external validation?
yeah. I think I learned this lesson probably 3 years ago,
Okay.
and it was this very big transition that I was making in my life, and there was this perfect storm of events that were happening. Um, One, like my cousin that I referenced earlier took his own life, and that was really hard on me because we were pretty close. I'd spoken to him over a very long conversation about a couple months prior to that, with him asking me how does he figure out his purpose,
Mm.
and I'm like how I don't remember what I said to him, but I don't think I had a very clear answer. Because how does someone figure out their purpose? I think we're constantly always trying to figure it out some
Mm-hmm.
way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the second thing was like I was burned out. I spent the better part of a decade building and scaling tech companies, and if you haven't been part of building tech companies, the ugly side that a lot of people don't talk about is the amount of hours and the sacrifice that you put in. Because especially at the early stages of the company, I remember doing like 6-7 days a week sometimes. You're talking about 10-12 hour days because that was what was required. And then there was this third part of it where I had this realization because I wanted to achieve a certain status. And when I say that, I mean making a certain amount of money and reaching a certain position in my life. So I became an executive. I made X amount of money, and I thought that would be fulfilling, and it was not. And it didn't. I didn't realize that until I got there, and then realized just how unfulfilling it was. It was just like another check off the box. So in between those three events, and I can't say they're necessarily related, they just all happened at the same time, but it forced me to take a step back and actually quit my job and went on a 6-month sabbatical where I really focused on what was it that was most important to me in my life, and it boiled down to one, impact. So how do I impact the world in a better way? And then two, I think the value that I wanted to capture most was freedom. And that's how I view the world and the things that I do now. Does it give me freedom to work on the things that I care about, work with the people I care about, and impact the world the way that I want? And those things have to check off the box for me now before I get involved in anything. When I was going through that process, to answer the question more concretely, I think this whole time I had been seeking this external validation, not just from like my parents, but from the world, like saying like, oh, like I made it. Like I was this kid who was born in a refugee camp, grew up really poor, and now like built this life for myself. And
you got there, and you're like, what else?
I got there. Yeah. And it was what else? And that's what I meant about being able to validate yourself instead of waiting for this external validation, because part of me was like, yeah, like I want people to see me successful, and this is what it's going to take. But it turns out I didn't need that, because the people that I really cared about in my life, they didn't care about that.
Well,
they cared about me as a person.
Yes. But in terms of getting to where you achieved that goal, you were very fortunate to achieve that and realize that money and status doesn't always keep you happy. Yeah.
Correct.
Well, I'm glad that you've you found. It sounds like you found a purpose.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, especially with magnifying the magnifying the talents of underprivileged communities, and also, I guess, not democratizing access in a way too.
It makes me really proud, because it's. I think many people in emerging markets and underserved markets don't realize what they're capable of, because no one's told them, and they don't know what resources are available out there.
Yes,
because no one's brought it to their attention.
That sort of mirrors the experience of the Khmer community all over the world as well, because you grow up with parents who have been through a genocide, and they have a certain sort of outlook on life, and it's not necessarily go and do what makes you happy, but more about surviving and making sure that you stay
Yeah.
alive. So their focus tends to be on things that may not be necessary where you are now in the world. So it's sort of,
Right.
you don't really know, like you're not really privy to some of the options that are out there. So thank you for sharing your message and your your aspirations on creating a better world for everybody.
Well, thank you for giving me the platform to share that.
Mm. Now, so you mentioned, well, I mentioned that you do a lot of traveling. What else do you do for fun?
Well,
Hiking, I think you mentioned. Because it
yeah.
sounds like
Well,
you work a
that's the
lot.
fun. I do a great job of blending things in. I tell people I'm like highly efficient. I can get done in a very short period of time what I think takes other people quite a bit of time. So because of that, it seems like I work a lot, but actually that's not necessarily the case because for the most part I control my own schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, on Fridays I don't do any meetings on Fridays unless it's an emergency. It's my time to just be heads down and get work done and feel good going into the weekend. So I actually cap the amount of meetings I take on a weekly basis. And yeah, I mean, in my travels, I enjoy it so much because it allows me to explore different cultures and everything related to that, and it's so much fun to be exposed to all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes down a lot of walls, and I wish I had this like magic power to just transport people into other cultures so that they can experience it, because I think right now we have this fear of like the unknown. And I think if people really get down to like the basis of it, we're mostly all the same.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think we all want the same thing, which is like a peaceful life, and to live a good life with our families and loved ones, and to be and enjoy our lives in the way that's meaningful for us. Um, so.
I think we are wrapping up now, but before we do that, what are a couple things that you want people to take away from our conversation?
Hmm. I think one, if you're an immigrant to another country, I think understand the power you hold. I think there's something special about being an immigrant. A good friend of mine, she's an immigrant also to Canada, and she recently posted about her meeting the prime minister and among other things, and talking about her refugee status. And it was like, just being a refugee just hits differently.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're just built different, right? So don't be ashamed of it. I think acknowledge it, accept it, and actually leverage it. I think number two, just because your journey hasn't been perfect doesn't mean you can't love it. Because there's going to be a lot of things as you go through your journey in life that aren't going to make sense until later on in life. And like I have another mentor, and she's like really amazing, also very just poignant and able to pick things out. And she said to me one time, I'm like, oh, that's great. And she's like, look, it's extremely difficult to try to connect the dots in the present sometimes, and even more difficult to try to connect them looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll get to a point in your life where there's this realization of everything that you've done has led you to exactly where you needed to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when you're in that moment, you're in your power. And yeah.
Oh, I love that. I've never heard it said that way. I know, a lot of people say everything happens for a reason and you'll figure it out once the time comes, but
Mhm.
I'd never looked at it like you are in your power. Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you for sharing those words.
My pleasure. No, this was so much fun.
Gao, it was delightful getting to know you and learning about the great work that you're doing. Listeners, if you want to help make an impact in Cambodia and come from a tech background, please reach out to Keo. Link to his LinkedIn profile is in the show notes. And lastly, Akun Charan for listening to the very first episode of 2025. Be sure to share it with someone you think would benefit from hearing what Keo has to share. And thank you again for coming along on this journey with me. We'll meet again in 2 weeks.